When it comes to leadership in Black podcasting community, there are people in the space who have been tirelessly doing this work for years. Verifiable living legends. Building, showing up, carrying it, many without fanfare and many without recognition. But despite this, without much public recognition, or in many cases, the support they deserve, we have all benefited from that work. What this conversation is not is an attack on what they have built, the attempts to advocate and solve issues, nor the personal or professional sacrifices they have made to better our communities, our works, and our industry. It's actually the opposite. For me, it's a wake-up call. From questions, emails, late-night phone calls, mentoring and advising, and even advocating in spaces where many times they are by themselves, it all takes their toll. And honestly, the burden many of them carry is too heavy for the too few. Because the work of this community is dedicated to building, preserving, and shaping our narratives, we cannot continue to rest on the shoulders of this small leadership group indefinitely. It's not sustainable, and it's absolutely not fair to them and the work that they do. More of us need to step up. We can't wait for a savior or an organization to do that for us. It has to be more of us, the individuals. Each one of us in this community have a leadership role to play. But first, we have to start developing the foundations, building the skills, understanding what leadership is in this industry, what it actually is, and what it means stepping into those roles. Nobody is coming to save us, and it's time that we start to save ourselves. And this is where I stand as your host. Welcome to this. This is The Sound of Us, where we talk with professionals and experts shaping the audio and creation industries in our community while seeking to preserve our own and shape the narratives that define us as one diaspora, many voices. My name is Corey Gums, and I'm your host. As I stated, there has been some recent changes in the past few years that have had us see the loss of some important events and communities dedicated to marginalized voices in our industry. For me, those losses have opened up thoughts and conversations of what gaps were created and who will help fill those gaps for the next phase of our industry. Will it be those who are here doing the work, overextending themselves by adding more to their plate, or will it be something else? And for me, I realized that the real questions weren't about who is already leading, but more, how do we grow the number of people to take ownership and not wait for others? How do we develop the right leadership for our future in this industry? But simple questions like, what is leadership? Like, what is it really? What does it take to develop it? And what becomes possible for our community when more of us do this? My guest tonight is Steve Worthy. He's a leadership coach, podcaster, and community builder, and is here to help guide us through these questions I have asked. Steve has spent 30 years building and developing leaders in demanding environments across industries, and he has spent decades understanding what leadership development actually does for individuals and for the communities they belong to. But before we get started with tonight's subject, Steve is also one of the original founding members of the Black Podcast Association and has been podcasting for a long time. He's an old man in this space. Steve, before we get into the leadership, you've been podcasting since 2007.
Yeah.
We're going to briefly touch on like your experience. What has been your journey? What have those years given you? And what does podcasting sit for you right now?
Yeah, first of all, outstanding speech. For those of you guys who don't know, Corey and I and another guy, we have our own little inner circle of conversation and feedback with each other. And so I would not, honestly, I probably wouldn't be the guy, the man I am today. Seriously, and I'm not even joking, without that level of community that I have with you and Walter, man. So. And then your opening was out. Don't do that. Don't do that. No, seriously, I wouldn't. I honestly, your wisdom, everything that you've done with Black Podcasters Association when you were on Facebook, right? When you started there, and I was one of the first people over there, and just to see what you're doing now, it's amazing. I steal a lot of ideas. Borrow a lot of ideas from you, from my community, and I just want to say kudos to you, man. Kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, in 2007, a buddy of mine. I was actually living here in Atlanta the first time, and we were teaching an entrepreneur class at our church, and what we found was that there were a lot of people that were like us. There were husbands at the time who were trying to become entrepreneurs and they're trying to grow their business, but they didn't have, a space to have those conversations. And so Jerry and I, we decided to start a conversation, podcast, if you will. We didn't even know about podcasting yet. I'll get to that in a second. But we realized that there were other people who we needed to serve, right? I think the best podcasts that are out there, this is just me sort of tipping my hand a little forward, the best podcasts are the ones that you're on the same journey with your audience, right? Because if you've arrived and you've already passed, I think you are along the same journey with your audience. And so, because there are so many lessons that we learn through that process. And we started having conversations on, I'm going to date myself here, Blog Talk Radio, which was like a conference, type, radio show. I don't know if anybody else remembers Blog Talk Radio from way back in the day. And then we was talking to another person at a church, and he told us about podcasts. And said, you guys should take everything that you're doing and make it a podcast. We're like, what is that? And he talked to us about RSS feed, uploading it, all the different things. And so the next episode, we recorded it and then we uploaded it, and then we just started that podcasting journey. And we started to structure our shows differently because we realized that this was bigger than ourselves. So I think partly one of the biggest things that I've learned is that while you may enjoy the medium of podcasting, there has to be a sense of professionalism that goes along with it, and that's been something that's helped me throughout my career. But that's just a little bit of my beginnings with the podcast journey.
Now, I have a question real quick before we get into the
Mhm.
leadership
Yeah.
conversation about your podcasting. And I know over the years, something that you've always kept saying is how we can use podcasting as a development tool, leadership development tool, right? Because as we know, it creates connection with your listeners and stuff like that. What did producing, I think you had over 100 episodes total of all the things, different things you've done. What did that
Yeah,
teach you
more
about?
than that. Yeah.
Oh, it's more
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry, buddy. Yeah.
What did producing over 100 episodes teach you about leadership that 30 years of coaching didn't?
Mm. I think, there's a discipline that, comes along with, and maybe it's the same thing, that leadership has, but there's a discipline that comes along with podcasting. You have to be disciplined. You have to you have to understand, where you are in this space. What space do you wanna own? And the discipline comes in, not chasing after things that are not of value to you. I see it all the time, and it's the same thing with leadership. As if you are chasing ideas and trends and things that are fleeting, you're not going to last long. I think the same thing holds true in podcasting. Unless your show is built on based on trends and you're talking about the trends, and then your episodes are going to be different. I get that, but I think over time, the discipline of being steadfast in your messaging and who you are. And I know a lot of people say, well, I don't know what I stand for yet. You just got to start having conversations and you'll figure it out along the lines. But I think the discipline is one of the main things that it's actually taught me. The second one is, there's a great deal of responsibility that I have. And I know that sounds very sort of pie in the sky when I say it that way. But every time I'm on this mic and I'm talking about leadership and I'm, really addressing issues that my audience, they don't really have a voice to talk about. I have a sense of responsibility in how I present leadership and how I give them solutions and how I help them identify gaps with them in their lives. And I think the same thing holds true, for all the podcasters that are out here. You have a sense of responsibility to your audience because there's an exchange that's taking place, right? Their time, right, for your wisdom or whatever it is that you're providing for them, and you have to take that exchange seriously.
That's great. Part of like, one of the things I was struggling with when we talked about doing this conversation was there's so many different lanes we can go down in regards to
Mm,
leadership. And since this show is more related to how do we use these audio formats, more particularly podcasting, to control the narrative for people of the African diaspora and how we could tell our
yeah,
stories and stuff. I was trying to figure out what's the best way. And like my opening statement, I didn't want to make it seem like there's a lack of leadership because
right.
you guys know me, I get aggressive and I'm kind of like you can't save
You
yourself and da 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 da,
you
So yeah, or well, since the Knicks are now going into the finals, New York City aggressive.
there
Um,
you go.
but it was important for me to figure out what's the best way to have this conversation. And after going through several iterations and several ideas and taking conversations we've had in private via text and stuff like that
Yeah,
about leadership over the years, it was like I think the most important part of trying to figure things out was, with all the different people that are in different levels in this industry, we have people who are on the executive side, people who are on
mhm,
the podcasting side, producing, and growing this community. I've met so many different people who have taken so many various types of leadership roles,
mhm,
stepping when there was issues going on in the industry, stepping up when and creating conferences, stepping up, creating communities, stepping up and just trying to be available to people to um, for mentorship and advice, or
mhm,
sometimes just
mhm,
simple
mhm.
text, right? Hey, like I saw your show. I think, maybe you should, maybe you need help here, blah, 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 blah. Um, I figured that the best way to take this conversation is talking about how do we create, and one of my dreams was when I started this community, the Black Podcast Association, was that we had empowerment, we took a control of our own work, of our own space in this industry, and
Mhm,
in order to do that, there has to be leadership, right? There has to be
right.
taking on it, not just waiting for somebody like myself or some of the other people in the community to step up and say, "Hey, what are you going to do about it?" Right? Like it's like, no, what are we going to do about it? So I figured we could take this direction and talk about more how do people who are watching this or listening to this learn that they have the power to step up and be leaders in the space, regardless of what level of podcasting, what level of where they're at, and I wanted to talk about that with you and during this
Yeah.
conversation and try to inspire and hopefully get some clarity for people in regards to what we think leadership is versus what it
Mm,
actually is.
yeah. One thing I often talk about is that, your leadership, right, solves a very specific problem. What we tend to think about leadership is that we can solve all of the problems, that a leader solves all of the problems, that they are out there and they're going after this, they're going after that. The best leaders I know have a very narrow perspective, of what they can solve. And that's honestly, I fought against that for so many years. I fought against it, like, after, that podcast, By Husbands for Husbands with Jerry and I started, The Worthy Podcast, and it was about diversity, leadership, and executive coaching. 3 of the broadest topics that you can have, and, I ended up getting myself a podcast coach. This is all I'm gonna bring it back around here in a second. I got myself a podcast coach. He was listening to all of my podcasts and all these different things, and he said, "Steve, tell me about, like, your retail career." I said, "Man, I don't wanna I'm not doing a podcast on retail. I don't wanna do a podcast on retail, man. I don't want to do it because there are so many podcasts out there on retail." This is 2015, 16, and they were always talking about the industry and stuff like that. I said, "I don't wanna talk about supply chain. I don't wanna talk about, assortment or, technology." So he said, "Just walk me through your experience." So I walked him through my experience, and he said, "Okay, next meeting, come to the meeting with 13 topics for leadership for retail." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Whatever," and I did it. I came back to that meeting, with Charlie Valher. Shout out to Charlie Valher. He's over in Australia. I came back to that meeting with 40 different topics, not 13, but 40. And in true coaching fashion, he said, "Well, what are you going to do with this?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to start a podcast on retail." And within a week, I changed up everything. Changed up the logo. I changed up. the format. And here's the other thing I did. I changed up my entire business because my business at first was Worthy Leadership Group. Now it's Worthy Retail, and we've added the name global on there because we have a lot of people that we work with overseas. And I said all that to say is that the more narrow I was able to get, the more focus, but also the more trust that people started to feel with me, because people want certainty, right? They don't want to hear me talk about, if I run a car show and my car show is about, 57 Chevys, they don't want to hear an episode next week about Lamborghinis. They didn't come to you for that. What are they coming to you for? And having that specificity around, what specific problem you solve is a really good thing, really good way to start. Because when you start talking about building communities, we start talking about, platforms and all these other things, when you have that sense of clarity around who you are and where you want to stand, everything becomes a lot easier. I mean, it's still tough, but it becomes a lot easier because you're not chasing after all of the different bells and whistles that are out there that the industry will try to allure us to actually have.
I want to take it one step back because that's a great answer. I think for me, it's always when I want to have these type of discussions, I think we have to like establish the definition so that
Mm,
there's an understanding for everyone that
mhm,
we're all on the same page, right? So like, because I've learned, like I've managed people. I ran a team of like 20 people when I managed a group home for several years back in my
yeah,
previous life in the developmental disability space. And, you learn to manage personalities, you learn to manage
mm,
the people above you, the people below you, the people your coworkers, right? Your
yeah,
peer. And then you also have to manage I had to manage parents, and I had all these different things I had to learn to manage at one time. And for me,
mm,
coming from different styles of leadership, it was like I had to figure out my voice in leadership. So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
what is from when you're working with somebody, what is for you the definition of the term leadership or the word leadership or the concept?
Yeah, I think, to keep it very simple, it's influence, right? There are so many different, ways of describing it and different attributes, but I think at the end of the day, as a leader, you're influencing. And you have to have a sense of responsibility for that level of influence that you create, right? Your job is to take people from where they are to where it is that you want to be. And then you are influencing the leaders along that journey. You're having conversations, you're understanding, like you were just talking about managing different people, you're understanding how the different personality types will be impacted by what you say, when you say it, how you say it, and then you're constantly making adjustments to your approach. You're constantly making adjustments to how you see people and what they can and what you can give them, right? Partly is because you want to get the best out of people. At its core, for me, I think leadership is about one of the benefits of it that I've always been able to utilize is to get the best and extract the best out of people, right? And when you're able to do that, guess what? Things do become a lot easier, down that line. And when you start to extract the best out of people, you help them kind of define who they are as a leader, right? Because they're probably all over the place, but your job is to make sure that you're going back and influencing them to have a better understanding of who they are. And we start thinking about, community, start thinking about, being black and podcasting. When Jerry and I started, we we didn't see anybody out there that looked like us. We utilized that platform. It was just it all just started to kind of work out. We started doing speaking engagements, right? In Atlanta about our podcast, but also about um, being a black entrepreneur, right? What are some of the real things that we have to deal with that our white counterparts don't have to deal with? Right, and it allowed us to have that freedom of speech, that freedom of expression, and we realized that there was a whole community out there that needed this, right? And we didn't start out that way. We didn't start out thinking like, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna be speaking." We were just like, "I just wanna have a conversation, man." And then that thing just turned into something else, and I think that's where, if you don't start, it can't turn into anything, but there you have to start somewhere.
How did you guys deal with that? Like, when you started realizing that the influence of your voices and you started seeing yourself becoming leaders in the area where, in the area of Atlanta you guys were working out of. How did that feel? Like, I know you're more in a leadership role. You've been in that role for most of your career, but then now you're doing this new venture, and it's like you're being called upon, and you didn't even that's not even what your intention was. That's not what you asked for, and it's like, how did you and your partner at the time, Jerry, how did you guys
Yeah.
process that and decide that this was going to be something you accept? Because I know that's another part.
Yeah, I think we were having a conversation on one of our episodes. I remember it vividly, and he was a younger leader. He had just got married. I think he was like 2 or 3 years married, and he had these ideas and all these different things. And I remember as we started to provide some insights and ideas for him, like he literally, like, started, like, crying, and because he was so thankful that someone listened to him, that someone was there in that time when he needed somebody to talk about this, where he thought he was alone in this space of challenging, and he didn't feel supported by probably by his family, all these different things, and so we provided and we didn't even know what he was going through, right? We didn't know any of that stuff, right? But we provided the place for him to express himself. I think it was that episode that really, solidified for us. I think we called each other like right after that. We were like, "Yo, dude, it's crazy. Like this is something. We have something here." And we started to approach it differently. That's what I talked about. We started to, professionalize the show, if you will, right? Just a little bit more structure, left some space. But when we started to do the speaking engagements and all those things, we embraced it. We embraced it. I mean, we weren't just in rooms that just looked like us, where we were in bigger rooms where audience were probably, all white, right? And they were learning from us, learning about podcasting, but also learning about entrepreneurship. So it just happened, and we embraced it. There was a sense of humility that we always wanted to make sure that we carried with us, because we know that this could stop at any point in time. But I think it was a matter of embracing the reality that there are people out there that are listening to you that you don't even know yet, and that you gotta take the responsibility, seriously.
I know for me, in my experience, I mean, when I started the community, I kind of knew I was going to be put. I didn't have the idea. Like, if you ask me now, would I be right here where I'm at, and the things that I've done, and the people I've
Yeah,
known,
same.
come to know and known through my journey, the past couple years in this space, I would have been like, it was just a crazy idea. It was like I was just trying to, like you said, it was a specific problem I was trying to solve that somebody challenged me on, and I was just like, all right, let's do this, right? And
Mhm, mhm.
it just, when COVID hit, it kind of just morphed into this bigger thing. But it was like, you answer you. It's kind of like you answer the call, right? And it's just,
Yeah,
it was just, it
yeah,
was like, oh, it's just gonna be a Facebook group, and then it just morphed into something bigger. And it was like, and I remember going back and forth. Like, my inner journey was just going back and forth, and I was like, it's driving me crazy. It's occupying this Facebook group is blown up. It's bigger than what I expected it to be. I didn't know what I
yeah,
wanted to do with it, and I kept just like asking myself if I wanted to do this. And my best friend at the time, I'll never forget it. Like, she sat there and she was like, "I'm tired of hearing you complaining about this. Either
yeah,
we make a decision to continue this, or we're gonna delete it now." And she like was like on my computer, like, delete it, delete
yeah,
it, right? Because
yeah,
I guess she was just tired of me going back and forth. And it was like, and for me, that was the moment when I was like, all right, you got to commit, right? This thing is, you had this idea.
yeah,
It's morphed into something you didn't expect it to morph into. You had an idea of what it could be,
yeah,
and then it was like, this is the moment to answer the call, because at the end of the day, when I would talk to like yourself and other people, it was like, people were so thankful to have this space. I was like,
mhm.
I can't just abandon these people,
No,
right? I can't just abandon these people who found a space that they enjoy, and that they come look forward to engaging in. And I was like, that would be selfish of me. And then it just kind of became something I was just like, I like what I'm doing.
yeah, yeah,
And
well,
then,
leadership is responsibility, man. It's responsibility, and I there was a seminal moment in my life, that it changed. it changed everything for me when it comes to leadership. I was in the Air Force, and they made me squad leader, and I didn't want to be squad leader. I didn't want to be squad leader at all because I was the youngest of 7, and so I was the baby, and I had everybody else had my back. I didn't need to have anybody's back. This is just real talk, right? And so when I got into the Air Force, they made me squad leader. It's like, I don't want to do this, man. I'm not trying to do this thing, you know. And we were coming back from our second clothing issue. Those of us who are probably in the audience, if you've ever been in the military, you know, there's different clothing issues during basic training. So, and then you have to march, right? Back and forth to the barracks, yada, yada, yada. So you know, gosh, I don't know, you know, several weeks removed from like high school. Like I still got a, bebop little in my walk. And I'm walking and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And the TI training instructor said, Worthy, stop that bebopping. And I was like, whatever, man. And just did it, just started walking naturally again, not even marching. He said, Worthy, next time you do it, you're not squad leader anymore. I was like, yes. And internally, I was like, yes, that's good. Man, I start going crazy with it. And he was like, Worthy, get in the back. And I was like, yes. So I'm talking about, I don't gotta look at you fools no more. And he called, we got back to the squadron. Yeah, big dude. He had to be like 6'6", man. Big black dude, man. It just like my voice is deep. His voice was deeper than mine. And he was like, Worthy, get in here. Like everybody just got quiet. I was like, oh, man. He walked me in and I walked in there and he said, Worthy, and his voice just got soft. He said, Worthy, you think you got away with it, didn't you? I said, sir? He said, listen to me. I know when a leader is trying to run from responsibility, and that's what you're trying to do. He said, when, when you're called to lead, lead. So you're not squad leader anymore. Now you're head of latrine. So he made me, instead of squad leader, now I was responsible for making sure that a bathroom full of 50 dudes in San Antonio, Texas, in the summer, that it was clean for inspection. Like it just those of you who down in the military, just think about that image. Like it's San Antonio, Texas, and so he made me responsible for that. But what it did for me is that I had to immediately jump into leadership mode. I couldn't go back. He already spotted that I was faking it. Right? He's like, no, you're gonna do this, and I immediately jumped into leadership mode, and that story just has resonated with me so much in my life when I feel like I can't do something worthy. When you're called to lead, lead. And he also said this. The first part was like leadership will always find you out, meaning that if you are in a room, if you're in a space, and people will see you as a leader, it will always find you out. A person who has a leadership presence, they will always be found out in that space. And that's a good thing. But I'm telling you, like that was my seminal moment, and I probably never look back from leadership roles.
Okay, so what is the leadership presence? Because I think one thing I've learned, I've always been the quiet one. I don't want to be like you. Like I didn't want to be responsible, but there was always a drive or something that would like
Mhm,
something in me. Just a problem solver. Like I always say, it's the engineer in me. It's like there's a problem here. We need to figure this out.
mhm,
And I would just jump in, and I've always been like a fighter, between fight or flight. I've always been the fight person. I'm always usually the one to just jump in no matter how much I don't wanna do it. I just
mhm,
like, it just happens. But what is this leadership thing that you said, the appearance, like, what is that? Because one thing I've learned being in this industry, in this space is that one is full of amazing people, and I'm
mhm,
meeting especially on the Black creator side, I'm meeting so many wonderful people from so many different walks of life, right? Different they're coming into this space from with different experiences.
right.
And I've always looked at that, like, as an opportunity for people to figure out, like, and try to encourage people as well, like, bring your expertise into what you're doing and what
Mhm,
you've done in the past into this industry and help us figure out some of these problems we're having or some of these issues that we need to fill or just fill a gap, right? Like, if you see an issue, let's figure it out. Um, And that's always been just for my inquisitive, but, like, how do like, when you say somebody walks in a room and it's kinda like you can't escape it because people just gravitate towards it?
Mhm, mhm,
Or,
mhm.
how what is that? Like
I think there's a sense of confidence that a person has. It's not cockiness, there's a sense of confidence, and what we call it is approachability, right? There is a sense that some of the best leaders have. They have the ability to, create an environment around themselves, right, that feels safe, that when you see that person or you have a conversation with them, you feel safe. You feel that I can actually talk to you and maybe talk to you about something that I probably wouldn't have been able to talk to anybody else. We talk about approachability in the context of it's the difference between finding out versus being informed, right? So you just think about it as you as a person in business, right? And you're running a team, and one of your top people leave, right? And no one told you about it. You had to find out, right? That has something to do with the fear, the fear of what you may say, right? For me, it was always best for me to be informed and to create that environment around me, because now we can actually generate some solutions once it's actually surfaced, whatever that issue may be, whatever that complaint may be. Once it's surfaced, now that's when the real work of a leader, gets started, because you actually start to ask more better questions. The leaders now that I know, the best leaders I know, is that we ask better questions, right? We don't just provide the solutions. You ask better questions, probing questions, questions that help the person feel seen, questions that help individuals understand, like, okay, I see where you're going with this, and I haven't thought about it that way, right? A question can become a statement. So you don't have to always think about a question as you're actually looking for something in return. You're asking a question to see where they are, maybe help them walk through or think differently through the process as well. So the idea around approachability, I'm seeing some of my best leaders that I've worked for, like I see them from afar off. I'm like, there's just something about that individual, but there's this sense of confidence that a lot of those leaders have.
alright, so part of the theme for tonight was developing leaders in this space
Mhm.
I said black audio. I really don't like using that term, but it is a very specific segment of the podcast industry. We have
Right.
taste, different consumption habits, different things we're of interest that we're into both as a community as a whole, and then individually, right? And one of the struggles I've been having is, when I created the association, my mentality, my management style was always like I always train my staff to replace me, right? One, I
Mhm.
don't plan on doing my job forever. But I always wanted to make sure, like you said, like these people are better, they're well informed, they're trained, and that I would always joke around and be like, like when I'm not here, like think like me, right? Like because I
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
I
Sure.
was very
Yeah.
entrenched with the staff I worked with, and I would always try to create an environment like we're here, we're working here 40 hours a week. We're probably spending more time here with each other than we are with our families. Let's figure out the best way to make this work. Let's,
Mhm.
and it was a it was a high stress environment. We're dealing with people with developmental disabilities, personalities, behavioral issues and stuff. So there would be times where it's high stress, and I
Yeah.
and I'm a very protective person, so I would always step in for my staff when I would see they were getting to certain points, right? But my point is like how do I know how to develop in that space, but how can we help develop? Like, what is some of the process? Because somebody decides to buy a microphone, get a camera,
Mm. Mm.
get on a microphone, starts talking about ideas they have. Next, they're building an audience. Next,
Yeah.
they have a following. Next, you have a circle of influence. And I know that was one of my struggles in the
Mm.
beginning. So if anybody's been here from the beginning, even to this day, in which I'm thankful for the community that I have, Steve and everybody else,
Right.
because when
Right.
Corey starts being Corey, I will get the message, right? It'll be like, Corey, like chill or, whatever, right? But I remember one of the biggest issues I had in the beginning was I wanted to be who I wanted to be. I wanted to keep my
Yep.
identity
Right.
but I kept getting told, you're leading this community. You can't just be out here saying and doing what you wanna do." Right?
Yeah.
And that was a struggle, and for me, it was like, how do we help people develop themselves who maybe never taken a leadership role or never, wanted to accept that part of what they're doing, even though no matter how much they try to avoid it, it keeps catching up with them? Like, what is that process for somebody like yourself, if you know, and I maybe we can use an example like somebody in retail who comes in, but you just see that natural ability. It's just, but they're just dodging the bullets like they're Neo. Like, how do we approach that? Like, what's a good strategy for that?
Well, the first reality that, and this is this, so I tell this to leaders all the time, whether it doesn't matter the level. One of the first responsibilities of a leader is to define reality for themselves first, and then also then for their team. Because if you don't do that first, where you are, what are the issues that you're dealing with? What are the things that keep surfacing that just keep, coming up? If you haven't addressed those yet, then I don't think you can go beyond that first and foremost. So if you don't take the time, and that is probably the hardest part, because the reality is that it's the reality of who you are, of your circumstances and what you're dealing with, and then being able to move past that. So when I think about, you know, and then the second part I'll say before I get to the third part is that honestly, everybody's not cut out to be a leader. They just aren't. And I think there are great people. I took over a market, and there was this one guy. I always got this happens all the time. I took over a market and had this one guy come up to me. He said, "Well, um, the person before you said that I was going to be a store manager. I'm ready." Da 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 da. Da. And I knew immediately that he was never going to be a manager. Just never. He didn't have the bandwidth. He didn't have the a business acumen. He was just he all he had was longevity. That's all he had. No one ever told him that he would not move to anything more. So I had to be the one to do that. And it was like the first conversation he's ever had with someone telling him, you just don't have the chops to be a leader at this level. He didn't like it, but it was the truth. And then years later, after I left, he messaged me. He said, Steve, that conversation that we had when you told me that changed everything for me. So we don't know how we impact people, but we have to make sure that we take those opportunities to let them know. When we think about a new leader that is may have all of the structure and maybe the ideas of potentially being a leader, partly is because, or partly one of the things that we talk about is, um, we often talk about leaders that we don't like, right?
Yeah.
Typically, I'll get in a coaching session at different levels with people, and a lot of the conversation is around leaders that they don't like, that they didn't like, they don't want to be that person. Understandably so. I get all of that. I said, but what are some of the good attributes that they had, right? And they struggle sometimes to get those things out, and then once we're able to sort of get some of those good things out, well, what are some of the things that you would do differently if you were in this situation, right? And so we just start this sort of dance of understanding where they are within their leadership journey, because a lot of times they don't know. A lot of times they haven't been asked certain questions around where they are, who they want to become, right? Because it's nerve-wracking, it's scary to actually talk about yourself in the future when you really haven't had the foundation in order to actually get there. So, it's in order to define reality for them. First, this is where you are. And for you to get to X, Y, and Z, right, these are the things that we actually gonna need to put in place for you. So, I think it's that dance of helping them understand where they are first, and that's the best part and the most immediate part that you as a leader can help other people, develop and go through.
I'm gonna push back on you a little bit on something
Yeah.
you said about not everybody is can be a leader.
Mm.
I tend to, I used to feel that way coming from
Mhm.
sports and even my own management experience and even in experience. I think the past 5 years running the Black Podcast Association and being in this new industry that hasn't really figured out its own identity yet,
Right.
and that has so much room, wiggle room for people to operate in, that I've learned that people there are that like it's challenged me to think about my definition of leadership sometimes,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Because we tend to expect leaders are the people who jump in, solve problems, da 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 da. They lead people, influence, like we've been talking about, and let's go, let's go charge over there and conquer this and all that stuff, right? And what the media shows us examples of. But I've also had situations where like the person I least expected to step up stepped up, right?
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And to me, that's a form of leadership, right? It's like
mhm,
you're looking around the room and nobody wants to be the first person on the dance floor, right? Like,
mhm.
and then that person gets on that couple or that person gets on the dance floor and starts the party, right? It's like
Yeah.
it may be that one singular act that shows a leadership quality, right? They may not have been. You might have looked at this person and be like, they're not that kind of person, right? And we've had
Right.
these moments, and even in our careers, we've had that moment where you thought the least person. So I try not to think about that, like,
Mhm,
and I think we need to like really have that conversation because I look at it. How does it look in this audio space right now? Again, it's an
mm,
industry that there's no clear. If you ask somebody what a podcast producer does, you're gonna hear like 40 different answers, right?
right.
And I've learned, like, because it's so ambiguous and such a such a severely structured place in that
Mhm,
career in that idea, there's opportunity for people to step up with new ideas, and influence things that they may not I never thought or they may never thought they were able to do, and it's sometimes just a matter of the circumstance, right, creates the leaders as well. So I wanna, like, that's something I wanted to talk about tonight too because almost like, how do we inspire those people who may have, as of one of our famous terms, imposter syndrome in regards to leadership.
mm,
Like they know they're observing, they're hearing, they're in their mind, or maybe they pull you to the corner like, yeah, da, 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 but they never step up. And I
mm.
think that's a good place too for some people, right? That some people
Yeah,
operate better in the shadows, as I like to
yeah.
call it. But but for the needs of our community in this space, and because we're losing because of what's going on societally, right now,
Mhm,
because we're losing these bodies that have been here before I started, right? That were important to our community and our voices. It's like we, how do we encourage those people to now step up when they come complaining or when they come with an idea or when they say we need you to do this, and I'm sitting here like I'm at capacity, bro.
yeah, yeah.
Because that's I'm going to
Mhm,
give you a chance to because that's a real thing. I mean, I literally just had a conversation with somebody that was like, I don't know how long I can with all the things that I have going on, my responsibilities in this leadership role
mhm.
that I'm not even getting paid for. Like, it's like, and I understood completely where they were coming from. And it was just there are great people in this industry that we're losing because the capacity is like they're over the capacity. They've taken on more. They have a sense of responsibility. They're trying
Mhm.
to keep this thing afloat. They're trying to protect the people they care about in this space. And then it's like, here comes somebody adding more pressure, and it's like, and then you don't want to be rude and be disrespectful and be like, well, then you step the fuck up. And I'm one of
Yeah.
the first ones like, oh, you got to step the fuck. Sometimes I'll be wanting to say that, right?
Mhm.
How do we reach those people? How do we develop a system or a way to encourage people to not wait for somebody like myself or yourself or any other
Yeah,
person out here doing stuff, and they
yeah.
think they have the capacity to do it.
Yeah, and that's but that goes back to, the fine reality, and when I say that a lot of people can't be leaders, I mean it because some people self-select, and some people self-select in the context of, like, they will have some of the best ideas, they will have some of the best things, and you may push back and say, "Well, why don't you do it?" And then they don't, right? And it's just like, "Okay, then." Well, yeah, I mean, what can you do? What can you do, right? And I don't mean to be this. I'm not being a Debbie Downer. This is just the reality of what I've seen throughout my entire career. And when a person wants to step up, one of the first things we should probably do is like, okay, why is this a big deal for you right now? And I don't, you can use different phraseology if you want, right? But what is this actually solving right now? Like, what can you do in the confines of whatever problem that you're trying to solve, or that you're bringing to the table. And when you push it back on them, you say, "Well, yeah, that's a great idea, right? Why don't you run with it? Maybe give them one or two ideas in which they could start with." I've done that. I don't know how many times in my career. Someone comes to me with a great idea, and said, "Okay, you know, build me a case." This was my old saying. It's like, "Build me a case for it." But because if it's that big of an idea or that big of a problem, you're gonna come back, to me with a case. You're gonna come back to me with some thoughts, right? And I just think we have to make sure that we we allow people to be who they are, right? And some people wanna just continue to stay in the background. Some people may have great ideas, and they don't want to, um, see them to fruition. So maybe it's around, why don't you create a space where they can just share ideas, and maybe that becomes someone else's idea, someone else's plan, someone else's perspective, right? So you're not you're not losing that voice, and you're not losing the quality of that individual or their ideas, but you're just really trying to help them cultivate the ideas, because there are a lot of people that have great ideas, but it's all about the execution. And that's okay. There are a lot of great idea people. I've had them on my team. "Steve, I think we should do this." "Okay, great." And then we'll move forward with it. So we have to just give people an opportunity to be who they are. And I know we want the majority of people to step up, right? Especially this space and time, that we're in. But a lot of people just may not have that capacity to that. That's just the reality, right? I think we need to make sure that doing what you're doing as a podcaster, right, is is helping, right? So maybe it's around the topics or ideas that you're presenting in this space. Maybe it's the solutions that you could potentially provide that could be different, right? So you have to. We talk about this all the time, Corey. We gear, right? Cameras and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? And this is what we deal with a lot. Or mics. Everybody wants to go and get the latest and greatest mic. Well, you haven't even maximized the capacity or the capabilities of your current mic or your current phone. So I think about the same thing with your show, with who you are as a person. Before you start trying to do all these other things, have you maximized your capacity and who you and your capabilities and what you can get? If you have it, then I say start there first.
Yeah, that's what Steve tells me all the time, guys, so
Uh, so I'm subtly coaching Corey.
Yeah, so, it's so many different things I wanna ask. Like,
Go ahead, man.
I wanna go into, Imma pivot a little bit. I know we have time,
Yeah, no, I'm good.
time and stuff, but, we talked about, like, what leadership is, some of the things, like, we face as leaders. What is there a thing such as a bad leader? Because I think, one of the question I wanted to ask you too, like, as you're talking, you're saying these are the thing marks of a leader, asking the right questions and stuff
Yeah,
like that is, when you hear somebody say it, especially, in this age of the YouTube and social media and stuff, when you hear people trying to always define what leadership is, what the skills are, are you're not a good leader if you're not up before 3 a.m. or, you got to be in bed by 7 p.m., all those things. And it starts to make you feel like I don't even
yeah.
have I don't even have what it takes.
Mm.
But what is a bad leader in when you said that, I just said it and I went blank. That's why you need a pen and pad, people.
Yeah, that's what I got right here.
Basically, what you said was like, you're talking as if this is a natural skill. Can people learn the
Yeah,
skill of leadership?
yeah, 100%, 100%. There's, John Maxwell, when he wrote a whole bunch of books, and, one of the first books was Developing a Leader Within You. I read that, like, in '95 or something like that. I'm old. And,
You know,
you know, one of the questions that was posed to him was this, like, are great leaders born? And really what that question was asking, can leaders learn? Can people learn to be a leader? 100%, 100%, right? You just have to, um, you have to understand or realize, like, why do you want to be a leader, right? Why do you want to lead? Why do you want to be overseer of people? right? There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing bad about asking yourself that question, right? But the people who are bad leaders are the narcissist. I want to just want to be in control. I want to be able to tell you what to do. Period. They won't say it that way, but that's how they lead. And so when you start talking about good leaders versus bad leaders, I mean, I've had a boatload of bad leaders, right, on my team and being led by them. Very much so in the context of do as I say, not as I do. I don't need you being a leader in any other way, shape, and form, or capacity other than how I want to run this market. I've been with leaders like that. And I think we have to make sure that your motives are correct, right? So I think about you with BPA. I think that's the one thing that really, gravitated me to you and everything you were doing was the motive behind BPA. Even back in the day on Facebook. I said, "This dude's motives is good. This dude's I don't care if he's from Queens, but, his motive his motives are good, and, he wants to see the best, right? You always wanna see people win, people that are on your team, people that are in your circle, right? Those are the marks of a leader is that your ability to, how do you help people win? Right? How can you be selfless, right? What can you give, right, to help that individual? Your time, your resources, your ideas, like going out to coffee. I was just writing some stuff in my book around, um, you know, how I started, getting back into coaching years ago was that people will say, "Hey, Steve, can we grab a cup of coffee?" And those coffees, like in 2006 and 7, turn into coaching sessions and counseling sessions, and then I fell in love with helping people move forward, move to their best next, and it's carried itself all the way until today, right? So, yes, there are a ton of bad leaders out there. I just think we have to make sure that we check our motives, or else we can go down, the bad route. And here's the other thing in this, a lot of people who are, of course, in the workspace will get this. All it takes is one bad opportunity for you to go from a good leader to a bad leader. I've had it. I've seen it. I've seen leaders get passed over who are really good leaders and they get passed over. And guess what? They start holding everybody else back because they got passed over. Right. So all it takes is that one opportunity from you to go to good to bad. So we have to be mindful and understanding who we are.
I feel like we're talking about, like, villain origin stories and stuff, man.
It's the truth.
A lot of it plays some movies, like,
Serious.
it's always a struggle, right? In these days, how do you deal with in when you're at capacity in those days when you're challenging yourself and you're like,
Good, Daniel. I was just reading Daniel's.
"Oh, I can't
And
see it." I've learned to not add it as a distraction. I have to take it off my
oh,
screen.
I got it. Must
I'll
yeah.
I'll catch
Can we also before you finish, can we ask people if they have any questions too?
Sure, yeah.
Because I'm tired of you talking and listen and Corey and I go way back, everybody. So don't take it personal. But go ahead, Corey, finish up.
Yeah, if you do have any questions, feel free to put it right in the chat, and we'll catch up with him and Steve, since he's paying attention to them, he can answer those questions. But how do you deal with because especially when you're in a leadership position where you're dealing with people, right?
Hmm.
Managing personalities, and
Mm,
now I understand myself better because I've learned some things about myself the past couple of years. But one of the hardest things was me recognizing when enough is enough. I'm at capacity with dealing everybody.
mm,
Why am I torturing myself? Like those things.
mhm,
How does one, because I don't think sometimes people realize how much energy and I hate saying that word in this way, but that's the best way I can explain it. How much energy it takes from you to manage and to do these things on a consistent high level, right? Like to stay as consistent as possible, to do like you said, like, stick to your motive because sometimes the reason why you're doing it, you like, boy, this ain't worth it.
mhm, mhm,
But I know for me, it was always like a battery in my back when somebody would tell me like, how somebody might have answered a question, or I meet them in person and they're like, thank you for this. This kept me in the game, or I just enjoy my time here in the community, or I enjoy the people who I've become friends with in the community. And I'm just like, all right, stick it out. But how do you self-care as a leader is what I'm
Mm,
getting to. How does one manage that? How do you help other leaders coach themselves through their own self-care? Because some of us get obsessive about it,
mhm. Well,
you
I
know.
I think part of it is that you have to manage your expectations of people, right? First and foremost, right? I think when we start to expect way more than what the person can give, then we start to get frustrated. We start to, um, start to feel a certain way that they're letting us down. Well, if you would have really done your homework and understood where you stand with this person. So we talk about it in our I talk about it in our approachability framework, and it's a smile framework. And the M in smile stands for mindful listening. And what I'm talking about there is you have to know where you stand with each one of your people all the time, all the time. And that requires work, like good, bad, or indifferent. If I understand my level of relationship with Corey, then I understand how to actually speak to him. But here's the other side of that. And the reciprocal is that let's just go like talk about leadership from 1 to 5. So if I'm a level 5 leader and Corey's a level 3, my relationship downward to Corey is a lot different than Corey's upward relationship with me, right? Because of this gap that exists. And what we tend to think is that everybody's on the same level, and they're not. And I'm not trying to, speak in a super like this high-minded perspective, but as leaders, there is a hierarchy. You asking somebody to do something, right? They could feel like, oh my gosh, Corey's asking me to do something. Yes, I can do it, but they may not have the capacity for it, right? But it's the simple fact that you ask them to do it, there's a sense of honor and awe. Oh my gosh, I got to do it, right? And then you get pissed off because they don't have the capacity to do it. Well, if you would have really maybe dug a little deeper to understand the realistic expectations in the relationship between you and that person, then you would have been like, I don't know. You don't say this in front of the person, right? You're like, Corey,
Don't do what Corey does.
yeah, yeah. It's I don't know if I could ask them for that. I don't think they could do it. I don't think they have the capacity. Or I could say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about possibly doing this. What are your thoughts? Do you feel like you can be a part of this? If not, don't worry about it. If not, don't worry about it. I just want to know if you can. If there's a piece of this that you can play, great. If not, don't worry about it. Right. But I think as a leader, we have to make sure that we're managing our expectations of other people first and foremost, because we will feel that people are letting us down. Well, are they
8
really?
o'clock p.m.
Are they really if we didn't set the realistic expectations, within that relationship first and foremost?
Yeah, sorry, but I don't know if everybody heard that, but that was Steve's parole officer.
Oh, I gotta take my ankle bracelet off.
That's a great answer. Because I'm gonna start wrapping up. I know we talked a lot about things, and the funny thing about conversation like this is you have like a whole plan, and you're like, but
Yeah,
and, you kind of go off the rails, but it was a really good conversation, and I want everybody that's listening and watching right now to understand, like, for me, this is the beginning of a conversation, right?
right.
This is not a immediate answer, right? When we're trying to figure out leadership in this space for Black. And I want to throw this out there too. Like, I concentrate on Black podcasters, but Steve and anybody else that knows me, tend to say our organization,
Yeah,
we're ambassadors to the podcast industry, and the more we get our stuff together, the better it is going to be for the industry as a whole. And that's kind of like my inspiration and motivation for starting this podcast and starting having these conversations. Is like, how do we improve what we need to improve for us so that we can improve the industry overall? And that's important, right?
yeah.
I'm trying to plan for the future, like, when post Trump or post whatever's coming, this industry is always changing and it's always something new. A couple weeks ago, a community announced they were shutting down.
Mm,
Really wasn't expected, right? And it's a huge loss and it's a huge gap. And I was like, how can we use this platform to inspire other podcasters in this industry or people who are
yeah,
part of some of these communities that have shut down or events that are no longer happening to step up, and whether it's on a small scale or a large scale,
Mhm.
help pick up the pieces and not wait for somebody like myself or some of the other people in the industry who have been, putting this on their back like their atlas and
Yeah.
trying to keep it propped up because there is an attack on Black voices, there are attack on marginalized voices, and it's important that we figure out how to come together and how to and in this time, we need people to step up,
Yeah.
right? And show a unified front and show that we're on the same page. And I just wanted to figure out like how does leadership show for everybody? I
Mhm.
don't expect everybody to start another community, but you can
Right.
start one locally. So, like, and I know you're not heavily into the industry side of things, but me and Walt keep you aware, and you also know from things from your own experience inside the community and stuff.
Mhm.
From somebody in the development space, what is some advice you would have for us on how we can improve our skill sets and leadership in this particular industry?
I think partly, podcasting is such a great space because you don't need anybody to greenlight your stuff. You know
Right.
what I mean? You don't need anybody to sign off on it. And my daughter started a podcast, probably like I don't know, it's probably been like 8 months. Maybe no, almost
About
a
a
year.
year. Yeah.
It's
It's
been
about a year.
about a year now. And, as her and I were talking, she wanted to do some other things, and then we focused in on her career, right? She does event planning for, large events, and she's doing so now she's an event coach. And, partly, my conversation with her is like, find and talk about what you're really good at. And she has. And I think about the same thing for everybody that's out there when and it's the same dynamic, right? Like I just talked about leadership. Find that specific problem that you can solve. Your podcast is the same thing, right? It's that specific piece of content, a resource, that a particular person is going to need. So, uh, from a leadership standpoint, podcasting allows you to sort of already become a leader, right? The minute you start having an opinion and you're consistent with that opinion, you start taking on a voice of influence within the industry. And then to your point earlier about with everything that's going on, right? We need more voices, right? We need to flood the market, with voices, with quality ideas and concepts and conversations, right? That are moving people away from um, you know, maybe some nonsensical things, but something that's really concrete that's actually going to help people move along, help the help the community, right? Help the culture move along. Because if we don't do that, we're just going to get a lot of people who are gonna be coming into the culture and just, sort of robbing it and, becoming, this the whole grifter stuff, like, I it just I it that's a whole 'nother topic that we could probably talk about down the line, but, you have to be somebody of substance, and I think partly as a podcaster, right, when you do become, a person of influence. So how do we just get people to just, be consistent with, expressing their ideas? And really that's what a podcast is, like, you have an idea, you have a topic. Man, I'm expressing my ideas. I'm expressing my perspective. Um, my podcast, Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, it's not like anyone else out there in the retail space. All the other ones are you know, industry. It's the what?
Steve is
What are you
humble,
gonna
y'all. Steve is humble, y'all.
No, man, I know, man. You listen to me. No, I'm humble about a lot of stuff, but one thing I know is that, I don't talk about the same stuff, in the same way that some of my peers within the retail podcasting space, you know, um, their stuff is very surface level. My stuff is very it's we get to the core of what you're dealing with as a leader, because that's what the leaders need. And I'm okay to step into that space, right? And I think other people have to be confident in stepping into whatever that space is for you.
Yeah, you kind of stepped on what I was going to ask you next, which was what are the
Oh.
stakes? What do the stakes look like for us if we don't,
Oh,
if other people don't step up? I know for me, from being where I'm at in my position, the stakes are we lose a lot of. I don't think people, part of being in the spotlight, it's something I'm still learning to deal with, right? In regards to this space, is people coming up to me and that, acting like I'm like a mini celebrity, like a D-list celebrity or something, right? Like I've and it's like for me, it's I realize that a lot of people that are in my situation are just normal, regular people who just happen to step up in a particular moment, in a particular
Mhm,
time when there was an issue or they felt a certain way about something and then now 10 years later, they're legends in this space, right? They're people who we look
mhm,
and
mhm,
we listen to and we seek mentorship from and or we see them out here doing, more really important things in a representation for our community. And, for me, that's the stakes, right? It's like we need more regular people to step into these shoes
mhm,
that sometimes are left, unfortunately, with some like the closure. You guys are gonna keep hearing it, but these closures of some of these communities and events have really affected how I see my role in this space because I collaborated with a lot of these people.
mhm.
I try to
Yeah.
we shared a lot of spaces together, so it hurts, but it's like now people are like, "So Corey, what are you gonna do?" And I'm like, "Bro, like I'm struggling doing what I'm doing right now. Like this is what I have the capacity for." So it's
Mhm,
like
mhm.
I'm trying to figure out like how do I help bring these people in? And the stakes really is not necessarily myself, but other people like myself that have been carrying the torch by themselves in a long time are going to burn out, and then
Yeah,
we're gonna lose it. So I really want to encourage people to understand that conversations like this, and when somebody says to you, "Well, why don't you do it?" or "Why don't you help figure out how to do it?" or when you come say, "Corey, why don't you do this?" I'm like, "I need help."
yeah.
Then you
Mm.
maybe you need to answer the call that you didn't want to answer, which is come help, right? Um, but for me, those are the stakes. But from yourself in a space where you
Mhm.
helped build leaders and come and fix leadership problems, what do you see as possibly like the stakes if we don't have people to come in and help take on some of the responsibilities of leadership in places we need them to?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that we when challenges or situations take place, we tend to go, wide and shallow, right, with how we approach something, right? Because we think about spreading um, and not really, concentrating our efforts. I was talking to a coaching client a while back, and we were talking about him and his role and what he's doing. He wants to influence his team and things like that, and influence the company. And I told him, "No, you have to go deeper. You have to go narrow and deeper in how you um, provide value for that company." Right? And I mean the depth. You have to think about whatever that problem is that may be facing that company or your department. You have to go 1 or 2 layers deeper because that's where the real crux is. That's where nobody else wants to go. And that's where your leadership it can actually, be more beneficial. And when you do that and you continue to go deeper, it's like a tree, right? And I actually use the same analogy with him. It's like a tree. The bigger the tree, the deeper the roots, right? And what we tend to see is that there's just a lot of people who are going shallow and they don't go deep enough where they currently are, right? What more can you do where you are, right? How can you do the most where you are? Stop following this and stop doing that, but get deeper. Because I think when we when we when we see a lot of podcasts that don't survive, um, I'm not saying it's all because of that. But it's more along the lines of like you have to outlast people sometimes. And you and I talked about this, a couple of weeks ago is that you have to even outlast yourself. You have to get past that space um of awkwardness and that no one's listening, but people are listening. You have to go deeper. The more shallow we go, and the more fleeting it becomes because we think we're influencing things by uh not really getting to the core of certain things. And I just for me, I don't know, it just doesn't sit well when I'll listen to a podcast or something like that, and I was like, "Man, this could be really good. I wish they would go just a little bit deeper. Wish they would just go a little bit deeper." Right? So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I just think that, um as a podcaster, have you gone to, to the depths of your show and what your show's capable of and what you're capable of? What topics are you afraid to talk about? Because the deeper we go, the more roots we have, the less likely it is for us to be uprooted and cast aside.
Yeah, that I think that's like, the human instinct to stay in this place that's safe,
Yeah.
that's comfortable, that you might dip your toe in that deep space every once in a while just to make yourself feel like you're challenging yourself, but it's almost like you're teasing yourself and you're not really rising to your capabilities.
Yeah, yeah, and then you're not doing yourself any justice by that, right? You everybody that's listening, everybody that's on here, I know that you all of you, you're way more capable than where you currently are, right? You have to challenge yourself. You have to challenge yourself. You have to think differently about who you are, right? You don't have to change up the format of your show. You don't have to do all of that stuff, right? You have to execute. You have to do, right? All of us are capable of doing way more than we actually think is possible, right? We did a study, last year for retail leadership development, and when we did the study, we ended up with 621 different respondents all over the world,
That's
right? In a retail space, and this year we got one coming up where we just cracked over 1,000. But last year when I did the study, um, I had somebody reach out and they said, "Hey, do you want to come present some of your findings?" And I was like, "Yeah." And where is it? Those could be New York because I was at the same conference last year, the year prior, and they said, "No, it's in London." I'm like, "Oh, duh!" I'm like, "Heck yeah!" Right? So I was able to, you know, take something. If I didn't never do that study, if I never took that opportunity to go deeper in what we do with Worthy Retail and the campus, um, if I didn't do that, I would have never had that opportunity to share with a group of retailers in a global format. I said that to say is that because when we get out of our comfort zone and we start to do things that feel uncomfortable, man, guess what? People will take notice of that. Not just your inner circle, your mom and your pops, talking about people in the industry. So everybody on this live, you are far more capable than you are giving yourself credit for, except for Corey.
I mean, this whole journey's been uncomfortable for me doing public speaking, lives, all that stuff. So yeah, I agree with you on that. And Steve just wants to be like me when he grows up. But all right. So we're gonna start to wrap up. Part of the sound of us, I ended with you giving a charge. So the sound of us basically um it exists, as I stated earlier, it exists for telling the diasporic stories, right? For us controlling our narratives. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you, right, for somebody that's listening right now who's been waiting for someone else to go first, what do you
Mm,
need them to understand about what their leadership actually looks like? What is your charge to us?
mm,
And then what do you need our community to do to carry the spirit of the sound of us on in regards to leadership? Do you want me to
yeah.
go one by one or do you want
Yeah, yeah. No, give me the first question
the
again. You're
first
trying to
one
you're
is
trying to overload me, man.
yeah, that's what I tend to do. I'm learning, y'all. As I do this, I'm gonna get better at this. But for someone listening right now who has been waiting for someone else to go first, what do you need them to understand about what their leadership actually looks like, their role in leadership?
Listen to me. You are you are losing so much ground by not acting on on something that you feel that you should be doing, right? I see it all the time. I have conversations with people who, they have a great idea. And they do have the capacity to do the idea. And to your point, to what you just said, is that they're waiting for someone else to go first to test the waters, to see if it's viable, to see if there's um, legs to this idea or concept or whatever it may be. telling you, nothing gets accomplished by doing that. Like, nothing in your life, man, there's so many regrets that I have for things that I thought about doing and I didn't do. And sometimes when I'm looking in the space of what I'm doing now, man, I look back and I'm like, "Oh, shoot, if I woulda did this, I would probably be this much further." I'm human, I get like that in situations, and you and Walt and Cher and James have to kinda bring me back. I'm like, "Dude, no, you and my daughter, like, no, you're good." But I think, man, I don't like living with those regrets of not acting on something. And so my I guess my push for everybody is that, man, don't get 4 years down the road and being coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm telling you, just give it a try. Ask for help, right? Ask for help with an idea, but just try your best to get it out there because the regret that you feel. I'll give you an example. I and this is a very small one. I had this checklist that I wanted to present and I wanted to put out there. This is probably 2022 to like the retail leaders about this hiring guide, right? Like helping them with this hiring guide, da 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 da. And I was like, oh man, I don't think nobody's gonna like it. I don't think anybody's gonna like it. Oh shoot, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. And I didn't do it. Why 4 months later, this she's a peer of mine in the space. I never told her about my idea. She's all the way to Netherlands, by the way. She came out with almost the exact same thing. And I was so pissed at myself. I was so pissed. This is a small one, but I didn't act on it. I didn't act on it because I was too afraid about what other people may think about it. And I think that's why a lot of people hesitate. A lot of people hesitate.
All right. So I kind of feel like your charge to us was in that statement. What is something you would like to see us do as a community? You know, the people who are watching, listening. What do you what give us some homework.
Mm. You
I mean,
think
you just said a really great thing.
I think Kay Wilkes wrote it down there, right? Have you gone to the true depths of your show? You know, honestly, like, can you go deeper? Like, can you make yourself uncomfortable with your show? Right? Not make everybody else uncomfortable, but make yourself uncomfortable with a particular topic or an idea that, man, I really want to talk about this. I really want this. I think this may resonate with people. I think this could help somebody. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I should do it or not. Right? That's the inner working of I know of your mind. It was for me, but I would just go back. And I'm not saying nobody's show isn't great. That's, except for Raphael's. Raphael's show was horrible. No, Raphael's I know he's there because he was talking crap to me already about football. So that's why I'm messing with Raphael. But I honestly feel that if you were just to think about that, just think about where you currently are. Really think about where you currently are, because the deeper you go, the stronger you will become. And then you'll start to realize that people are resonating with some of that depth, right? So that's my charge. Is that good enough?
Yeah, that's good enough, bro. I mean,
Okay.
you got some gems tonight. So, Steve, one, thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of
Yeah,
this. You've been
of
a
course.
great support over the years, and despite as much you bust my chops, and we bust each other's chops. I really appreciate our friendship, and both
Yeah.
professionally and personally. Tell the people how they can learn more about what you do, how they can reach out to you, how they can, you know, um, learn more about Steve Worthy.
Yeah. Well, the podcast is Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy. And, I always say that the ideas that I present are universal, but retail is the lens, right? Because that's what I experienced and went through for 27 plus odd years. And I think you as a listener or as a person or as a leader, you can resonate with some of the ideas and concepts of what a retail leader has to go through. Because like I think the stats were like, over 50% of people here in the States have either worked a retail job and things along that line. So you have some experience and some ideas, but the ideas that we put out there are really universal across industries. But you can also reach me on worthyretail.com/now. You can go to the podcast there. You can learn about the campus, which is our membership community for leaders. Um, our study is there. Everything is there at worthyretail.com/now. Or check me out on LinkedIn too and Substack. Let me see. We got 73 people. I'm expecting 73 more new subscribers. I'm just throwing that out there.
I want to throw this out here too because I know Steve's concentration is retail leadership, but a lot of his content, a lot of the subject matter he talks about is actually you can use it. You can actually use it in your day to day life and some of the things that you're doing, whether it's your professional job outside of podcasting or within the podcast space. I found myself learning from Steve in regards to that and translating what he teaches people in retail on how I can do stuff personally. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. So,
And this is not a paid endorsement. So
no, I know. Yeah, yeah. Here's the thing. This may be another secondary piece of advice is that people gravitate to clarity. They will gravitate to clarity, not pop and circumstance. The minute I changed my podcast from The Worthy Podcast to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, my clarity on what I wanted to address and speak about jumped up, I don't know how many percent. And what that did was that people found the content, the clarity in which, we trying to present ideas, it gravitated to people, right? Or people gravitated to it. So even in our community, it's a retail focused community, but almost 35% of the people that are in there are not even in the retail space. And it adds up, and there's a similar number for the people that I coach, right? Around 65, 70% are in the retail space, but then the other 35, 40 are in different industries. And I firmly believe it's because of the clarity of messaging. So if you think about where you are with your podcast, just think about the clarity and not just conviction, right? Because I think it's clarity over time. People will start to gravitate to that. So make sure you're dealing with some clarity.
all right, Steve. Thank you, bro. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you
Yeah,
having
man.
me here. I also
Absolutely.
appreciate everybody who's checked in live, watching,
100%.
um,
Thank you all.
having comments, even the ones that are jokes. But I really appreciate everybody giving me your time this evening. Just to remind you guys, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, subscribe to Black Pod News, blkpodnews.com. So you can, you can be informed of our next conversation that we'll have, our next guest. If you're interested in being a guest, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always looking for different voices, different perspectives and topics that we can do to talk about that affect us here in the content creation space in the diaspora, the African diaspora. Um, the sound of us exists because the diaspora's narratives deserve to be preserved, owned, and shaped by the diaspora itself. Just remember, we are one diaspora, many voices. My name is Corey Gums, and I've been your host. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a good night.
Good night. You sound like Don